Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the CalSTRS Investment Committee meeting. Christine, would you please take the roll?
For the Director of Finance, Ms. Peralt.
Present.
For the State Controller, Mr. Oppenheim. Mr. Tang.
Here.
Ms. Yamamoto.
Here.
Ms. Bradford.
Here.
Ms. Hendricks. Mr. Gunning.
Here.
For the State Treasurer, Mr. Ruffino.
Present.
For the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mr. Patterson.
Present.
Mr. Juarez.
Here.
Chairperson Keeley, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Christine. And do you have something to read into the record for us?
I do.
Thank you.
The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board should wait for the 10-minute public comment period at the end of the agenda item the speaker wishes to address. For comments not pertaining to a specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the beginning and end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there is not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only their first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information such as their last name, age, or school may not be shared. Since the May Teachers Retirement Board meeting, CalSTRS received 88 communications requesting CalSTRS divest from Tesla and or other Elon Musk businesses, 5 communications inquiring about Trump media and technology, 1 communication and 102 form emails as of close of business on September 2nd, urging CalSTRS to initiate a review process of investments related to the geopolitical conflict in Gaza.
Thank you, Christina. With that, I entertain a motion to approve today's agenda with some flexibility.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Ken, seconded by Denise. Without objection, the agenda has been approved with flexibility. A couple of comments, opening comments before we begin our meeting today. I'd like to thank everyone who's in attendance, especially those who've traveled a long way to be with us today after a 3-day weekend. So welcome. Since the May board meeting, we've made some changes here in the boardroom, primarily technology changes. So we're all going to be very patient with the chair as we navigate these devices up here. But we've made those changes. For those in the room, you'll see a separate wall clock behind the dais and above the screens that has been added to help those making public comments to keep track of your time. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to welcome some new people who are joining us on the dais today. Delegate on behalf of the State Controller, Maria Cohn, is David Oppenheim, Deputy State Controller. Also here today is Dean Patterson, a new delegate on behalf of Superintendent Instruction, Tony Thurman. I want to welcome David and Tony. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to thank everyone who has worked preparing us for today's agenda, and all the people, all the staff who have prepared the materials, the staff that has worked to ensure that we traveled here safely, the technology staff, the people that feed us, the security that are in the building, everyone that has worked to make sure that we could run a productive meeting today. On behalf of the board and the committee, we thank you, our heartfelt gratitude. Our agenda today is primarily around oversight and looking at the semi-annual reports, and we'll hear from our independent consultants on the performance of each asset class and the total portfolio in open session. We will have extended closed session as well, where we will be discussing individual securities or individual investments in more detail, and that will happen in closed session. We'll hear from our CIO today. Included in his report is also some overviews of the exclusion policy that we've had in place and its impact on the fund. We'll hear from June Kim around the total fund management and one fund approach and some of the risks and opportunities going forward. And at 1 o'clock, we will have a panel, international panel that will be interviewed in the accompanying room. We won't be here, and that will be a 1 o'clock hard start. What else is there? Sometime in the mid-morning, we'll take a break, and we'll break. So halfway through the agenda this morning, we'll probably take a 10 or 15-minute break. We'll break for lunch around 12. Come back at 1 o'clock for the panel discussion. Anything else that we need to cover? I think that's it. I think we want to make sure that as we hear the semi-annual reports from our consultants and we look at the performance over the last year, it's critically important for us as a committee to look at long-term results, 3, 5, 10, and 20-year periods of time. Denise?
I just want you to note that it says 2:45 is open session on the slide, but it's closed session.
Okay, thank you. So super important, keep that long-term approach. And as we've been talking about for the last year, the critical importance of building a resilient portfolio. One fund, total fund approach, a resilient portfolio, and the role that technology can help and serve us better meet our mission and our goals. It goes without saying we're living in very complicated and divisive times. Many issues that are impacting all of us are taking place outside these rooms, and in a world that is extremely divisive, volatile, and complex. What unites us here in this room is our mission and our purpose, and that is to ensure the retirement security of California's educators. And that gives me great solace and comfort, knowing that there's a unifying mission that we all have, and it's a noble mission. It's an important mission. And to find something that can unite us, I think is super, super powerful. That's why I thought it was important to recognize everyone in this organization that helps us to achieve that mission. Whether we're board members, staff, consultants, we'll hear from the public today who will have views on issues that are very, very serious and complex. We take those, their comments seriously. We have our staff meet with our stakeholders. Staff reports back to us. These are very challenging times, and the risks associated with managing a large portfolio are one that we are all keenly aware of. I want us to go back, continuing to go back, to regardless of our role in this organization, we have a unifying mission, and that is to ensure the retirement security of California's educators. And there's no more powerful force in meeting that mission than the investments of this portfolio. About 65 cents on every dollar in this fund is generated by investment returns. And we have a sacred obligation to make sure that we meet that mission for the next 100 years. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to item number 1, which is, or item number 2 is opportunities for statements of the public. Samantha?
We actually have a public comment for item 1 first.
Okay, sure. Public comments for item 1.
Okay, if we can get a 3-minute timer, please.
And our speaker for item 1 is Edward.
Hello, my name's Edward Hasbrook, and I'm the spouse of a retired teacher and a CalSTRS beneficiary from San Francisco. I notice that you have on your agenda for the closed session later today, item 16, consideration of a specific unspecified investment decision. I very much hope that that item is to consider whether to continue to invest in Tesla or whether that is appropriate. As you know, your fiduciary duty is to exercise the prudence that a normal person would exercise if these were their personal investments. Now, a normal person, a prudent person, wouldn't necessarily look at every stock in their portfolio or in an index fund or every holding of a mutual fund they hold. But a prudent person would, once or twice a year, look at the top holdings. What are the top holdings of this mutual fund? What are the main components of the valuation of this index fund? And whether it still makes sense to hold them. And for the same reason, your fiduciary duty is to exercise that kind of due diligence and oversight over your holdings, even if the reason for the initial investment was merely their inclusion in a market index. We were able to meet, as Mr. Kelly said, some of us with your investment staff. It was very helpful in clarifying the situation. They told us explicitly and unambiguously that they have never made any attempt to assess the valuation or risk of investing in Tesla. You can't put it on the staff. You haven't directed them to do it yet. So the full fiduciary responsibility is on you, either to do your homework or to get the staff to do it. It's not prudent. Even a prudent 100 billionaire doesn't make billion-dollar investments blindly following an index or without tracking whether they're still valuable. So I hope that's what item 16 is about. If not, I hope you will place on the agenda of your next meeting or a special meeting called for this purpose at the first possible opportunity, consideration of a resolution to direct the staff to assess the valuation and risk of Tesla. You might want to do that, tell them to make that kind of assessment on a semi-annual basis for your top 20 holdings. But Tesla is a good place to start. As you know, it's an extreme outlier by any fundamental measure of valuation, volatility, and risk. If you're ever going to look at an individual stock, it should be Tesla. So I hope that's what item 16 is about, and that you'll act on that to move forward towards selling Tesla. If not, please put it on the agenda for your next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We will now take item 2, public comment. I'm going to call the first speaker and then also queue up the next speaker after that. Each speaker will receive 2 minutes, and we will start with the in-person comments. So our first speaker will be Sarah, followed by Alyssa.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Holtz, and I'm an organizer with OPEIU. We're organizing workers at Teleperformance jointly with CWA, focusing on sign language interpreters. CalSTRS is the largest US-based investor at Teleperformance, with $57 million in shares. Teleperformance has had major labor rights issues globally, including wage theft, the use of abuse material in training, and not allowing employees to go to the bathroom. A series of governmental investigations led to Teleperformance entering into a global rights accord in 2022. That accord, however, needs to be extended and implemented in the US. As Trump decimates the National Labor Relations Board, CalSTRS can play a leadership role in ensuring that Teleperformance has high-quality labor rights standards, including a path to unionization for its employees here in the US. We look forward to further engagement with CalSTRS about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Alyssa, followed by Thomas.
Good morning, Alyssa Giacchino with the Private Equity Stakeholder Project. As you know, CalSTRS now commits 44% of its portfolio to private markets. Private asset classes deprive investors of the governance tools of public markets. In order to address these governance gaps, it is imperative that institutional investors set policies for risk mitigation and value creation, such as workforce management principles. The landscape for private market investments has evolved, and private equity firms are facing disappointing returns, more competition for deals, high interest rates, and a massive $1 trillion backlog of unrealized portfolio companies. In light of labor controversies and growing evidence of financial risks, industry players are setting policy to guide improved outcomes. Maryland State Retirement Pension System is the latest state pension to adopt a responsible workforce management policy, joining New York State Common, Illinois State Board of Investment, and CalPERS. A number of asset managers have also adopted labor principles, including Apollo and Blackstone, acknowledging the link between worker issues and investment returns. Investing in employees through competitive wages and benefits supports value creation per UPenn's Wharton School. Deloitte found that companies with a program to manage workforce risk reported better performance. Implementing good health and safety practices can reduce costs associated with injuries and lost productivity. Poor workforce practices can lead to operational disruptions, high turnover, litigation, fines, and reputational harm that can have material impacts on companies' performance. Private equity firms own over 29,000 companies and oversee 13 million U.S. workers. Private equity-backed companies have a higher risk of bankruptcy, which often results in layoffs and other workforce harms. Retailer Joann Fabrics closed the last of its 60 stores in California earlier this year, laying off more than 20,000 workers across the country. Investor-led oversight has long been an essential tool for protecting resilience and ensuring sustainable business practices. As asset owners seek better alignment with GPs, we encourage
Thank you for
CalSTRS
your
to adopt
comments.
principles. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Thomas, followed by Mary Jo.
Hi, I'm Thomas Pattison, a beneficiary of a CalSTRS, father of a CalSTRS beneficiary. I bring with you over 1,300 wet signatures from Yolo County about defunding Tesla. This shows widespread support and concern about Tesla. The core risks for fiduciaries include Tesla's mix of execution slippage, legal exposures over marketing claim, softening demand in Europe, among other places, and heavy reliance on non-operating credits, atypical compensation, government signals heightened awareness. There's litigation issues that $1 billion in a lawsuit that it advertises self-driving cars as being safe. It's had years of missed autonomy about robo-taxis. It's also lost sales in Europe. There's been no dividends or paybacks. There's been no real increase in the price of the shares over the last 5 years. Total amount of money that Tesla's made is $36 billion, but $11 billion of that is from credits which have disappeared. And Elon Musk's a $29 billion compensation package completely dilutes the operating profits for a company that has a market of $1 trillion. Regulatory credits are going to decline. There's a key new risk. We're paying $29 billion to a gentleman who's very brilliant, I admit, but is only a part-time employee. While it's QME and the workers' compensation system have met many employees that are only making $22 an hour at Tesla. There were safety records of both the Fremont plant and the Austin plant are very poor. So I think it's time to consider defunding Tesla.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Mary Jo, followed by Christina.
Hello, my name is Mary Jo Walker. I'm a CalPERS member. I'm a retired city finance director, and I was the auditor controller for the County of Santa Cruz, and I'm a retired certified public accountant. I'm here to talk about Tesla as well, and your index funds, specifically to advocate for CalSTRS to sell its 4.5 million shares of Tesla, or at a minimum, at least analyze it to determine whether it still meets your investment standards and your goals. Tesla is a bad investment from so many perspectives. But being the analytical type that I am, I'll focus on what you are earning for your $1.5 billion investment, which is essentially nothing. This is a chart of Tesla's share price since its IPO in 2010. So you can see for the first 10 years it was pretty flat, and then in 2020 it really shot up. Oh, by the way, you have handouts of this. But since January of 2021, your multi-billion-dollar investment has returned a total of 12% over the 5 years. That's about 2.6% per year, not even keeping up with inflation. The price fluctuates a lot, changes every day, But the CEO and Tesla has so many problems, it's just not going to do any better for you. Comparing that to the Magnificent Seven stocks, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla, of which you have major multi-billion-dollar investments in each of those, Amazon was the lowest at 42% over 5 years. All of the others were way more, doubling or tripling in value. Tesla earned you 12% over 5 years, not even keeping up with inflation. I understand the reason that you own Tesla is because it's in the FTSE index that you use. If it is in the index, your investment team buys it and holds it, no questions asked, regardless of anything, even performance. Please direct your staff to regularly analyze the investments. It's your fiduciary responsibility. Shouldn't you be asking about this? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Christina, followed by Forrest.
I'm gonna play some sounds from Gaza from last night. This is just from yesterday. There's a 60-second video. That's just a couple seconds from what's happening in Gaza every single day. And it's being bankrolled by pension funds and corporations. I came here today to say that you said that you have a sacred obligation to ensure that CalSTRS provides a retirement for teachers in 100 years. As a Palestinian, I have a sacred obligation to fight for my people until they are free and Palestine is liberated. I'm here. I don't have the same kind of financial arguments as the Tesla people, but I am a member, I'm a teacher, and I'm a Palestinian. It is completely unacceptable for a teacher's pension fund to continue to invest in weapons companies that are blowing up kids. Do you know how many kids have been killed because of our investments in companies like Elbit Systems? We tried to go through the right channels. We talked to Diane. We got a letter saying that you're not going to even meet with us anymore. How is that acceptable? You have a $5 million investment in Elbit Systems, and your letter says that you can't divest from that. That's bullshit, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that you need $5 million in Elbit Systems so that we can have a retirement. Shame on every single one of you for not taking action for 2 years. A few days ago, the International Association of Genocide Scholars said this is a genocide, which means there is blood on all of your hands until you decide to do something about this. The ocean, sailing to the coast of Gaza to deliver aid, and if you tell me you can't do something, you're full of shit.
With all due respect, okay, I'm glad you finished. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Forrest.
2 minutes. Sure. And 2 minutes is the spot, but if I'll provide some leeway with the 2 minutes, okay, with reasonableness.
Members of the board, teachers work hard and look forward to retirement. We'd love to sunset into a beautiful and just world, or at least one in the process of healing. We dream of a world without perpetual warfare and weaponized coercion, a world in which we channel our creativity and intellect for life-affirming pursuits. What a sad society it is in which teachers are funding this heartless, bellicose splurge, this militaristic mass surveillance society. How disappointing to be digging the graves of children. We are not down to bankroll genocide. Take a moment to imagine the terror that we are putting children through. You just heard some of the sounds. Imagine jets ripping overhead here. Imagine a missile, a Boeing-made missile, striking this building. What would that feel like to all of you? I think about it every day. So if you awoke under rubble, I don't think that you would be okay investing in these companies. Now think of our teachers' investments. There's a heartbreaking congruence, our pension investments. I don't even need to name the corporations out loud. You all know exactly who they are. I appreciate some eye contact. It's what we also teachers expect of their students. Thank you for being active listeners. That teachers have a role in genocide is a testament to the military-industrial complex that will never change without the decency and the will. In a capitalist system, investments is the lifeline of economy. Our money is bolstering the corporations that are killing children. Pull our funds, please. Take away the power we are giving. Take away the power that we are giving those corporations. The board has declared their unwillingness to meet with CalSTRS Divest, a group of educators that want out of the war economy. You are denying us a voice. We have statewide support among unions and teachers and retired teachers, and we're growing every day. I can only conclude that you're fearful of confronting a deep shame and that you're blinded by a perverse greediness. CalSTRS has been earning mega profits, beginning divestment process from some of the most atrocious actors, Palantir, Elbit, Boeing, and Caterpillar, as we've demonstrated, will not jeopardize anything. But you know what? Even if it did, warfare. I'm not okay with this. We are teachers. You have to pull our money from weapons manufacturers. It's never going to be okay. You have to do this for us. Teachers. I'm a teacher to develop world peace in this world.
Thank you.
We can do that through education. You are undermining actually everything we are dedicated to. When you say we are united by a mission, we are not. My mission is world peace. It's not simply to retire. That's not it.
Thank you.
I'm for world peace. Please be
Me
for
too.
world peace as well.
Me too. Thank you.
Well, then that's our united mission.
Thank you.
Act on it, please.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Sarah, followed by Candace.
Good morning. I'm a professor of history, a Jewish resident of Sacramento. I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. I'm also an active member of the CalSTRS divestment campaign. I'd like to respond to your recent letter declining further meetings about divesting from Israel's genocide in Gaza. You wrote that, quote, "You balance achievable investment returns while protecting against events that may impact the markets," unquote. And that you don't want, quote, "geopolitical conflicts to influence your investment policy." Yet, the International Association of Genocide Scholars has officially declared that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. So I must ask you directly, do you take a stand regarding genocide? Do you believe in investing our retirement funds in genocide? The facts are stark. UNICEF reports that over 50,000 children have been killed or injured. Save the Children says it's equivalent to a classroom of children killed every single day. There are more child amputees in Gaza than anywhere else in the world. And just yesterday, over 100 Palestinians were killed, including children lining up for water in what's supposed to be a quote-unquote safe zone. You say you care about education, yet every university in Gaza has been bombed. You represent teachers, yet schools have been systematically destroyed. I ask you to consider, would you have said the same thing about divestment from apartheid South Africa? Would you have prioritized returns over divesting from companies that produce Zyklon B, which the Nazis started using in 1942 to exterminate Jews, including members of my own family? At what point do you draw the line? Your refusal to consider divestment is a moral failure. It has nothing to do with protecting my divestment funds.
Thank you for your comment.
Can I begin?
Samantha, who's our next speaker?
Our next speaker is Candace, followed by Kathy.
Hi, my name is Candace Youngblood, and I'm a high school art teacher. I teach my students the importance of creativity and how we can imagine a better world for all people.
And as their teacher, I understand the significance of doing what's right, even if that's not always easy and even when it's soul crushing. My actions mirror my values. I was horrified to find out my mandatory teacher's retirement pension was invested in weapons, surveillance, and companies that are currently facilitating genocide in Palestine. What does it say about our values as teachers to be investing in the US war machine? How could educators possibly be okay with their retirement contributing to the deaths of children and families? How do you, as CalSTRS board members, put financial gains over human lives? Y'all say you can't divest, but I disagree. You don't want to do the hard work of divestment. CalSTRS should be eager to work with its members to create ethical investment portfolios, not dodging any accountability for profiting off of human oppression, suffering, and death. Shame.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Kathy, followed by Fauzia.
Hello, I'm an educator, and this is a very hectic time of the school year, but I'm taking time to be here with you. Tonight, I'll be on my campus for an event with students and their families. So I'm a real teacher, okay? I hope to retire in the next few years, and I'd love to have, of course, the biggest pension possible, yeah? I've gone to some of the CalSTRS webinars, and they're good, and there's some room for improvement, but that's another day. So every month, money's taken from my paycheck to invest for my pension. I don't want money I have earned used to support genocide. I'm aware that investments are complicated. I'm also aware that many people are getting paid really good salaries to manage our investments. So please use those people to manage for better, for right, for life, not to go against human rights, civil rights, political rights, not to support war. Okay, so you need to find a way to move these investments away from that. And I don't have all the facts and figures, but you were given a report. Please read the report. It was updated at the end of August. Okay, we're not asking you to destabilize our investments and jeopardize our pensions. We're asking you to value people who are living under apartheid conditions and war. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Fauzia, followed by, we will start taking phone calls.
Good morning. My name is Fozia Farouk, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator with the Council on American Islamic Relations, California. CARE California endorses the CalSTRS divestment campaign. We stand in full solidarity with our teachers and public workers who refuse to be complicit in systems that fund occupation, violence, and human rights violations. At a time when educators are being targeted for simply teaching about Palestine and our public dollars are tied to companies enabling a humanitarian crisis, we believe it is our moral responsibility to divest. Remaining silent or invested is not a neutral act, it is a choice. We urge this board to listen to the voices of students, educators, and communities across California who are calling for accountability and justice. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We will now start taking people in the call-in queue. Our first caller is Ralph. Ralph, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Ralph Ballard, and I'm a CalSTRS member. I am also a participant in the Divest Tesla movement. We believe Tesla is an increasingly risky stock with declining sales and a robo-taxi initiative that is likely to fail. Tesla and your other largest stock holdings are held in index funds. And we have learned that your investment team typically does not analyze the portfolio risk of any stock held in an index fund. I urge you to adopt a policy requiring the CalSTRS investment team to provide the board with an annual risk assessment of the 20 largest stock holdings in your portfolio. This is not a radical proposal, it's just common sense, something that Warren Buffett does all the time. And we believe it might allow you to catch a future Enron, which we believe Tesla to be, before it collapses and you lose $1 billion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your call. Our next speaker will be Elliot. Elliot, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Elliot Hellman. I currently work with San Francisco Unified School District. I'm also Jewish. Palantir, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Elbit Systems, Bank Leumi, First International Bank of Israel, Israel Discount Bank A, Israeli bonds. Through these investments, these instruments you're investing in, you are fueling the genocide of Palestinians and fueling anti-Semitism because Israel claims to speak for the Jewish people. The Jewish presence here today clearly shows that it does not. And rightly or wrongly, people will conflate the crimes of Israel with the Jewish people. There is no moral or fiduciary justification for supporting starvation as a weapon or for bombing schools, targeting doctors and teachers and hospitals. If nothing else, Judaism teaches us that all life is sacred. Divest from genocide. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Nita. Nita, go ahead.
Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I am calling because I no longer want to be complicit in this genocide. CalSTRS has over $2.2 billion invested in corporations that are actively facilitating the Gaza genocide right now, actively paying for Israeli apartheid and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine in the forms of weapons, surveillance technology, fossil fuels, and Israeli bonds and banks. I demand that CalSTRS immediately investigate these investments and immediately divest from Palantir, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Elbit Systems, Bank Leumi, First International Bank of Israel, and Israeli bonds. We must stop funding genocide. We must stop funding ethnic cleansing. And we must stop making millions of teachers complicit in this genocide. We must stop funding it, and we must be in accordance with the ethical investment policies. We are meant to care for each other. We are meant to care for humans, not spend our taxes and retirement funds murdering innocent teachers and murdering innocent students in Palestine. Stop funding this genocide. Stop profiting from murder and ethnic cleansing. Stop. Your children will one day look at you and judge you. Your grandchildren will one day put their heads down in shame. Free Palestine, and you will all see, all of you, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Lista. Lista, go ahead.
Oh, do you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Listen, I refuse to be made complicit in this genocide because all of you want to buy your little vacation houses while teachers and mothers and fathers are picking up their babies and students in body bags. The CalSTRS investment policy requires the investment committee to investigate these investments that violate the ESG policy. CalSTRS must fully divest from companies that enable the Gaza genocide, and you must start with these complicit companies like Caterpillar and Palantir. These companies, like you, profit from their involvement and support of Israel's genocide and occupation of Palestine. And we must stop and not do the same. The UN says that starvation in Gaza is at phase 5. Phase 5. That's the highest level of starvation that you are paying for. And at the same time, as these students and teachers and mothers and fathers and grandfathers are starving to death, the Israeli military is ramping up its latest assault on the city to completely expel and murder all remaining Palestinians there. And you are lining your pockets with the money soaked with their blood. You will profit from this too. You will profit from the murder and destruction of innocent human life. And you can never say you didn't know, because you knew and you did it willingly. I refuse to be complicit, and I demand you stop making the state's teachers and staff complicit in this genocide. Stop funding the genocide. Divest from slaughter.
Thank you for your
Divest
comment.
from ethnic cleansing. Free
Thank you for your
Palestine.
comment. Our next speaker will be Arthur. Arthur, go ahead.
Hi, yes, I'm a CalSTRS beneficiary, and I'm just calling in to join the group of people asking for divestment from Tesla. I just, leaving aside the practical financial considerations, I just want to say, from whatever you want to call it, a PR standpoint, a principle standpoint, alignment with your membership standpoint, a lot of the issues we're talking about have been exacerbated by the Trump administration, and there's a man who's been the biggest cheerleader and tech support guy for the Trump administration said that he loves Trump more than any man can love another man, did the Hitler salute twice on stage. That's Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla. He is an extremely polarizing and controversial political figure, and at some point, I feel like any major institutional fund that has its money backing his ambitions, whatever they may be, on a given day has to account for that. And I don't think your membership is on board with funding a man who called public employees parasites and celebrated their termination by waving a chainsaw on stage. So that's my take.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Alexander. Alexander, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alex Day, and I teach high school in Berkeley, California. I'm calling today also as a member of CalSTRS Divest, and we demand CalSTRS divest from Palantir, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Elbit Systems, Israeli banks and bonds, and all of the $2.2 billion in investments that CalSTRS currently has that is profiting from the genocide in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, and human rights violations around the world. These investments do not align with teachers' values, and us teachers in California don't want to retire on blood money. Just 2 days ago, the International Association of Genocide Scholars overwhelmingly declared that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, together with the International Court of Justice's ruling December 2023. These two show that CalSTRS is on the wrong side of history. As before, when CalSTRS divested from South Africa, now is the time to stand and show that international human rights law actually does have some sort of meaning. Institutions with CalSTRS influence and leverage on markets and on politicians, to be silent is to be complicit. During Black Lives Matter, we all said silence was violence, and the same has been true since October 23 about the genocide against Palestinians. And so we demand that CalSTRS have its investments reflect the values of the teachers that it serves, and divest from all of these companies, and also to maintain open and ongoing dialogue with our group, CalSTRS Divest, the campaign that has been pushing for this for the last 18 months or so. And that public transparency period, but especially communication with us about these demands is of the utmost importance in maintaining the trust that CalSTRS
Thank you for your
members
comment.
are having. Yes, thank you.
Our next caller will be Vanessa. Vanessa, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Vanessa.
Hi, I am a current California middle school counselor and I'm calling to demand that CalSTRS immediately investigate the investments in Palantir, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Albert Systems, Bank Lumar, First International Bank of Israel, Israel Discount Bank, and Israeli bonds. The fact that that list even goes on so long is so infuriating as an educator, as someone who has been deeply invested in finding ways to continue to divest from this genocide. I am also from Hayward, and we were able to push our city council to divest from very similar corporations, including Caterpillar. And I know that it is a big ask for your staff or whoever looks into your investment portfolio to do this investigation and divest. But I think it is so important that we are prioritizing where our money is going towards, especially if we are trying to create equitable systems in our schools, yet we are putting money towards an ongoing genocide that has killed so many children. Children have not been in schools for almost 2 years now, and I think it is so wild the amount of students who have not had the experience that our students here have had the privilege of having. And so I just want you to look deeply into your hearts, and like other speakers have said, think about what kind of impact you are having based on the decisions that you choose to make moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. That is the conclusion of public comment for item 2.
Thanks, Samantha. So just let the public know that our staff will report back to us the nature of the meetings that they've had with the stakeholders, and that the issues that have been raised today are serious, they're complex, there are many factors, and you should not leave here thinking that your comments aren't being heard and that they're not being discussed appropriately at the right time with the right people in the right setting, which is closed setting. And we will continue to educate ourselves to ensure that this portfolio is a resilient portfolio, that it's dynamic for the next 100 years. And we will continue to rely on our experts to help guide us, our legal experts, our consultants, and learn from colleagues around the world who are looking at some of these same complex issues. You should not leave here thinking no one is listening to you. We're hearing what you're saying. And with that, we're going to take, given the nature of the public comments, the chair needs a 5-minute break. So we'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll come in with a video. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay, we are back in open session. Yeah, exactly. Okay, if you could please. Thank you, everyone. We're back in open session, and we are going to go directly to our feature of a member that our communications team has been doing now for us for about the past year. So why don't we go right to the video that features our member. Jonathan?
In 1977, I was 17 years old. I was asked to join a women's club team, and we won a national championship. I was named first team All-American. I was just a kid. My name is Elaine Roquet. I'm department chair of kinesiology and athletics and full-time faculty at Santa Monica College. I was probably about 13 when I first started playing, and they didn't have kind of youth club teams like they do now. I was totally intimidated. They were all former Olympians and whatnot, but they took me under their wing. I was very lucky. I got all sorts of collegiate offers for scholarships. I was still in high school, and I ended up skipping my senior year in high school to go to UCLA on a full ride, and during that time played for our U.S. national team. And was fortunate in that I had a lot of success. I won a world championship title in 1990. I represented the U.S. on the world tour. And along the way, SMC kind of needed a volleyball coach. And I think that's how they got word of me and reached out to me. Oh, I fell into teaching. I totally fell into it. Like I said, I was playing on the pro tour, and the college had an opportunity for a one-year full-time sub. And when I got here, I got to teach a wide variety of classes. I really loved it. I've always loved having that opportunity to work with students. And I really believe, and I tell my students all the time, the best part of my day is when I'm with them.
The volley, right? So we all know I can't be in here volleying, but I can.
I think I've always thought it's fun. I mean, even though at the end of a workout you might be exhausted or you might have lost a match, deep down inside, it's fun. And I always felt that if my students were having some element of fun in class, why would they come back? I just resigned as chair, so officially this June I am stepping down from being department chair. So I've been chair for 13 years. So I'm beginning to wean myself out. CalSTRS has given me incredible confidence about retirement. I really had no idea about the pension and as a teacher, anything at all. And when I was made aware of it and I learned, it's made me feel incredibly secure and safe. I'm a little scared, honestly. I do have a lot of other interests. I do a lot of yoga. I exercise daily. I do woodworking. I want something to look forward to, and I think some of those hobbies are part of it, but I also want to find something that enables me to also give back. I established 2 scholarships here at the college, one in my mom's name when she passed for nursing students, and I just established this year Elaine Roquet Kinesiology Athletic Scholarship for student athletes or kines majors. So maybe something like that, working to still help and support students. It goes like that. I started here just thinking I was going to do this for a year or two for fun. Then I thought I'd retire by 50. Then came 55. It's one of those things that it flies. And they say time flies when you're having fun. So I guess I had a lot of fun.
She did all right. Landed at Santa Monica College teaching volleyball. Nice job. Anyway, thank you to the communications team, and I don't know if Peter Morrissey from Santa Monica College was involved with identifying that member, but terrific, another great feature. Next item is our CIO report. Scott, good morning. It's good to see you, buddy.
Good morning, Chair Harry and the Investment Committee. I have 4 important topics to cover today. Number 1 is my take on the performance. Number 2 is our investment committee work plans, particularly portfolio resilience. I'll go through that. The third, and hopefully we get a little bit of celebration in here, announcement of 2 senior investment directors. And Vice Chair Sharon wanted me to go through the senior management team in an organization chart, so I'll do that as well. Unfortunately, she couldn't attend today, but hopefully she's going to be viewing this. So number 1, let me just start with the performance. As you know by now, CalSTRS reported 8.5% return for the fiscal year 2025, exceeding our actual goal of 7% and exceeding our benchmark, our strategic asset allocation, by about 8 basis points. So congratulations to the team for a solid year. We do get a little help from the market as well, so I don't want to undercut that. As you know, I always believe that 1 year is just 1 mile in a marathon. We're long-term investors. And so to me, honestly, the starting period is a 5-year look back for performance, but even better a 10-year and 20-year. And so if I look back 5 years, 9.4%, 76 basis points of alpha, 10 years, 8.1%, 47 basis points of alpha, 20 years, 7.4% with 2 basis points of alpha. So I'm encouraged by the increasing alpha as well as the solid returns. And I think what it says is, and I want to make this point, is that the strategic asset allocation, our diversified portfolio and the construction really drive this risk and return, right? So if I think about the most significant driver in the decision that the board approves and makes and staff and consultants recommend, we can go back and look at the strategic asset allocation, and that really describes a lot of our risk and return going backwards. But if you look back, we've been achieving our financial goals in seeking to secure the retirement future of our 1 million California educators. That part is clear by looking at the numbers. And so if you looked at our strategic asset allocation and portfolio construction, you can say that it's generally worked well in the past. Now we, as you know, have a high allocation to growth assets like private equity and global equity, and that's to achieve our 7% hurdle rate and above. But we also are diversified in the same coin to lower our risk and volatility, reflecting the fact that we're mature and underfunded liability set that we have. And so the allocations to RMS, for example, and we have greater allocations to private market assets compared to our peers. And I think that's notable when you think about making comparisons. But the main point is that we have a very unique asset allocation and portfolio construction, which is unique to fulfilling our unique goal of securing the retirement future of our teachers. This was a year that you can look backwards. And of course, if I could look backwards and look forwards with complete, certainly that'd be great. But if you put all your risks in one basket, it would have been the stock market that performed the best. It's actually been 3 years in a row where that's been the best. And so we've seen some of these runs over time. This could potentially continue. I've seen that happen. But eventually stocks don't rise to the trees. And, essentially, that's why we have a diversified portfolio where you're not going to see on the leaderboard every time each of the asset classes. You're going to see on the leaderboard different asset classes. And the fact that some are going up and some are going down speaks to our diversified portfolio. Now for 2025, clearly the global equity is at 16.4%. The third year in a row leading all of our asset classes was a highlight. Private equity, I would also mention 9.7%, a highlight. Conversely, our real estate division down 3% and RMS down 4.6%. But here I'd like to, again, draw back to take more of a long-term perspective, because over the last 5 years, different divisions have led or lagged. And that's precisely why we have a diversified portfolio. So if I were to look at fiscal year 2022, and of course, you, as a CIO, looking back at the negative year, because we were down 1.3% that year, it wasn't great. But in the grand scheme of things, we mitigated our losses, and the leaderboard looked vastly different. Global equities and fixed income were both down double digits in that fiscal year. But private markets shined. Real estate was up 26.5%, private equity up close to 24%, inflation sensitive up 17.5% that year, and RMS, of course, up close to 9%, right? So again, this speaks to having a diversified portfolio, and over the 5 years, we compounded capital at 9.4%. We would not have done that, obviously, had we not had that diversified portfolio helping mitigate our risk in 2022 fiscal year. The other comment I would make, and I started with the absolute return first because that's the most important, but over time we have been showing increased capability to beat our benchmarks, the strategic asset allocation. I think that's a highlight. 6 out of the 7 years in the past, we've been able to beat the total fund benchmark, and I give credit to the team for their expertise in being able to do that. This year, global equity, private equity, inflation sensitives, those divisions all beat their benchmarks very soundly. I would also like to mention that through our one fund approach, we started to add some value also above our benchmarks, and so I think that was notable. But let me just pause here before going on to the next component to see if there's any comments or questions about what I just said.
I see Steve's light is on. Is your mic on, Steve? I don't know if I can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you go, Steve.
Okay, yeah, I'm close to the mic. I just wanted to, I think, restate something that we've discussed both at the board level and in particular with Scott, so that it's understood that we are looking toward portfolio resiliency, which means that we are going to be structured in such a way that in years in which the global markets and everything else tends to go south, we will be better prepared to deal with those issues than we would if we were a normal pension fund. And I think that's largely due to the staff structure, the defensive structure we take, things like fixed income, RMS, inflation-sensitive devices. And I think the staff deserves all the credit, that while it doesn't allow us to go after the big hitters all the time, it will sort of augur us as we go forward, and I congratulate staff. I mean, hopefully we don't see those days, but the fact of the matter is that we will, unfortunately. But so again, I commend staff for the structure of the portfolio and how it's going to prepare us for the future. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Scott, we'll go back to you, the rest of your report.
So let me just expand on some of the work plans, because I think Steve was starting to talk about that. I hate to be the one to say this, because I know that I work in a field with a lot of pundits who make these proclamations, but I do think that this next decade, in my opinion, it's really shaping up to be a lot more challenging to navigate. If I looked at my career, and the number and the magnitude of the dramatic world-changing events are very significant. If I think about the AI race, the greater government intervention in policies that we're seeing both inside and between countries, higher potential structural inflation and interest rates compared to the past decade, volatile geopolitical risks that we've been hearing about even today, deglobalization, the global path to net zero emissions, immigration. These are just naming a few of what we're seeing in the world-changing events. And normally I'd spend more time talking about each of those risks and how we've been thinking about them from an investment perspective. But instead I'm going to talk about the board's 2 work plans, which I think provide the systematic approach for us to bring these topics to the board. And I'm going to go through this slide that describes our portfolio resilience work plan, which is the newer one that you adopted in the July meeting. So to focus on portfolio resiliency, I just want to make the statement, because of the larger shifts that we're seeing, it's really leading to the need for us to look at this more holistically. And it goes into organizational and processes as well as the investment portfolio. So I'm going to go counterclockwise and explain what's around this clock-like diagram to give you a better understanding, starting with diversification, where the castles are. I'd mentioned in the first part that our strategic asset allocation worked well in the past 10 or 20 years, but what's the best portfolio construction for the next 10 to 20 years and beyond? So you're going to hear from June, Kim, and the team today a little bit about that. And that's our starting point for portfolio resiliency, is thinking about the diversity of the portfolio. The second, then, going into alignment, which, or actually let me go counterclockwise and I'll go liquidity management, which I think we spent a lot of time on, that in a more volatile and dynamic environment with greater allocations to private markets, we've been enhancing our liquidity capabilities. So in light of a potential recession or downturn, we have the amount of liquidity to rebalance the portfolio, to mitigate risks, as well as to invest in opportunities which we know become the most discounted during recessions. Turning to the industry network intelligence, we're finding that, as was one example, as the global supply chain is being rewritten, leveraging our partners for this type of intelligence and expertise has been helpful. That's just one example. And now moving to information integrity, I think we've been seeing more of this. If you think about AI, the potential for fake news, we're even seeing attacks on independence of data from organizations spanning from the Fed to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so the data integrity, how are we going to secure that? How are we going to access the right data and making decisions? And then I'm going to go to alignment, and this one's a tricky one because we had a hard time describing this in one word. I think the other ones might be self-explanatory if you look at the word. But alignment to us speaks to the staff, the board, and consultants being unified around an approach on what are the big areas to focus on and prioritize given all the big shifts. And I mean, it's easy to get lost in that noise. And so we don't want to be distracted by the politics or the volatility that's going on in the market. And that's what we're aiming to do with that sleeve. I think for a little bit more of a wholesome discussion too, what are we trying to protect against? I'm going to go through some of the risks to give you a better understanding of how we're thinking about portfolio resilience. And to keep you guessing, I'm going to go clockwise this time. So if I think about investments, the market, and illiquidity, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. We talk about that all the time. But policy and economics is really something that's really emerging as a larger and larger risk. As the U.S. government, and not only U.S. government, around the world, the governments are playing a greater and greater role in business. And then going into the emerging risks, we're seeing a lot of emerging risks that are effects of this environment. So if I just think about demographically, potentially declining number of teachers and a lower base of younger teachers and immigration potentially affecting that. If I think about how correlated we actually are to state finances, if the state has less of a tax base, and then what happens given our contributions. So these are emerging risks for us to keep on the horizon as we undergo big shifts. And again, we talked a little bit about loss of focus with the alignment piece. And then going through organizationally, if you think about it, we've been spending a lot of time in this. How do we retain staff? How do we do succession planning? And that's been a large focus of ours. And finally, reputational, which is something also that's becoming an emerging risk for us in terms of headline risk. And so let me just stop here, and hopefully I've given you a good understanding of what portfolio resilience means to us and what are the topics we'll be bringing forward to the board. This was meant to go hand in hand, the portfolio resiliency work plan with the shared vision. And so if I were to describe the two briefly, the portfolio resiliency work plan is for us to mitigate risks and take advantage of opportunities from a holistic perspective, ranging from portfolio diversification, as I was discussing, to the risks of operating in a highly polarized political environment, that kind of span. On the other hand, the shared vision focuses on what we need to build and how we need to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years to better navigate seismic shifts in the environment. And so they're really designed to go hand in hand. And if I were to give you a quick example, if we were thinking about increasing some of our international exposure, that might be something akin to what we would consider in the portfolio resilience plan. Do we have too much concentration risk, for example, in a certain country? But building the resources and expertise would be part of the shared vision to think about how we would prepare for that future. So let me just pause here, and now that I've described the work plans, hopefully you have a good set of an understanding of the next 12 to 18 months, what we're going to be spending time on with those two work plans.
Questions, comments for Scott? Seeing none, Scott, can you continue?
Great. So this is my favorite part of the CIO report, which is really celebrating the appointment of two senior investment directors who are in the splash zone, the camera zone, as we say, and they don't want to be in the splash zone, so I'll try to make it quick. But Christy Jenkins has been promoted to Senior Investment Director of Private Markets and Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategies. This role is a new position. It combines Mike DeRay's prior role with CIS. And she's going to be working with me to lead and oversee the entire investment branch, but also oversee multiple divisions, including all the private markets, real estate, private equity, inflation sensitive, CIS, and the collaborative strategies portfolio. So I want to say the interview process was competitive, and Kirsty was clearly the top choice for a number of reasons. Number one, she's the right leader to oversee our private markets divisions, which total more than $135 billion in assets, so it's a big responsibility. She's also the right person to lead our future evolution in unifying our private markets teams to achieve scale advantages by leveraging our partners and combining cross-asset themes in our emerging one fund approach. And so I'm really excited about this part. I'm excited to see what she's going to be able to do with that. I think you should be excited too. She has more than 30 years of experience. I know she doesn't look like she has over 30 years of experience. Look at her, she looks like she has like 10 years of experience. She actually has 30 years of experience spanning investment banking and asset management, policy and asset allocation, with roles both in the UK. I don't know if you noticed, she has a little bit of an accent, but also the US. And so she brings some of that international exposure to the senior team. She joined us in 2019. She was technically my first hire. I remember joining in 2018 and then needing to hire an assist director. But she's been with us for 7 years. And I have to say that she took on the role of my new problem child. That was Mike DeRay, who really pushed, really pushed the boundaries on innovative structures. And she did that with her and her team, growing the multi-asset class CIS private portfolio. She's also led CalSTRS Net Zero strategic priorities since 2021. So again, I'm really excited and appreciative that she's taken on this role for our organization. Now, April, I did announce during the July offsite, but it wasn't on camera. So we're going to redo it for her. And she was really excited about that, I could tell. But she has been promoted to Senior Investment Director of Strategic Management and Operations. So let's give her a round of applause. She'll also work with me to lead and oversee the entire investment branch, but she's also overseeing multiple divisions like Kirsty. That's technology, data solutions, and technology transformation. Her team, as you know, assists with every transaction we do. So she's already been providing senior leadership across multiple issues around operations, compliance, performance, and analytics. And you should think that every transaction we do touches her divisions, which it does. And she's really been focused on overseeing our business risks, operational risk, and governance across the investment branch. You may not be hearing a lot about those risks because she's mitigated them, her and her team, and that's a good thing. It's working like clockwork. She also went through a very competitive selection process, but she was the right person. April has been the backbone of CalSTRS investment. She's going to help us lead two future evolutions that are key. One is strengthening our operations and compliance and performance teams to match the growth of the investment teams, which we identified. And the second is to really take us into the next level for technology and that transformation. She's been a key part of our team, and I'm going to shock you by saying this, for over 20 years. She also looks like she probably has only been here 10, but she's 20 years of experience here at CalSTRS. She was the former director of investment services and really achieved remarkable growth, enhancing our private market asset operations, our oversight protocols, and performance analytic frameworks, to name a few things, just over the last 5 years. So anyways, I want to give some time again to congratulate April. All right, so now, by the way, I love making these announcements, but I'm hoping that I don't need to make another announcement for the next decade. Wouldn't that be looking back here and they're saying no? Yeah, because I'm hoping that we'll just have a very strong, stable team. And here is a team. Sharon Hendricks, Vice Chair Sharon Hendricks, wanted to just have me flow through the senior team a little bit and describe the roles more and show you the org chart. So let me just say that, again, I created the senior management team as a forward looking way for us to think about how are we going to organize our management team. We've been growing our assets, becoming more complex and direct investors. And so to me, having a team of 4 really makes sense. And I break the role down into 60-40. And so 40% of the role is spent with me to lead the entire branch. And so what does that mean? Well, we're making executive decisions, right? So if we think about allocating our human capital across the different divisions, that's clearly one of the big examples of these executive decisions. The second, and I've talked about this, in my opinion, the biggest constraint on our organization, from my lens, is leadership. Because with greater leadership, you can create more and more value for the organization and for the teachers. And so if I think about the strategic priorities, which is one of the primary mechanisms that the senior team tries to bring and unify the organization around some of these value creation components, it's been in the past the collaborative model, where we've saved over $2 billion in fees. Geraldine will be overseeing that going forward. Net zero, Kirsty is going to continue to be overseeing that. And then the one fund, diversity in the management of investments, June will continue to see that. Those are our operationalized strategic priorities. And as for the 3 new ones, the shared vision, as we think about the next 5 or 10 years forward, Geraldine is owning that, and that's going to be very important. The one fund approach is co-owned by June Kim, who will be focused on how we allocate, how we assess total fund risk and manage and mitigate that, as well as the balance sheet. And then Kirsty to really lead us towards scale advantages where that's appropriate. And finally, tech transformation, which is April. So those are 2 of the most important components of the senior team. But the other component I would say is as we think about the investment strategy, where are there gaps within the divisions that we need more leadership to fill? So we think about building a unit like the total fund management division. That takes a senior team to come around and do and build. And so that's one element. If we think about new allocations that don't fit within the divisions, an example of that might be private credit. You need a senior team to find the allocations to lead the organization towards seeding those and potentially growing them over time. And that's been very creative to us. And then scale advantages, as we talked about, who leads in putting themes together and leveraging our partners. That's the 40%. And 60% of the time, as I already mentioned, all of the divisions of the organization now roll up to these 4, this team of 4, including myself, 5. So June with the total fund management, asset allocation, total fund risk, balance sheet, that's liquidity and leverage, centralizing those critical functions. Geraldine, overall the public markets, global equity, fixed income, RMS, consolidating the positioning and views from the public markets. Kirsty Jenkinson over private markets, real estate, inflation-sensitive, private equity, CIS, collaborative strategies, and consolidating our positioning and views across those private markets. And then April over operations, compliance, performance, data solutions, and the build-out of technology. So I just wanted to spend a lot more time here because this is our leadership structure. It's very important. And taking the time now to go through it, I think has been important. I'm glad that Sharon mentioned that and wanted me to do it. So I'll pause here and see if there are any questions.
I don't see any, Scott. Nope.
Great, thank you. Well, that concludes my CIO report.
Thank you, Scott. And congratulations to Kirsty and April. And with that, we will go to the semi-annual reports.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Do you have any-
Oh, yeah, Mr. Ruffino. Let me see something, Frank. There you go, Frank. Mr. Ruffino.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Scott, for the report. Just a quick statement from the treasurer, if I may. Treasurer Fiona Ma, as a CalSTRS board member, is proud of the fund's strong performance this year and congratulates your entire team. But even more importantly, she is focused on what comes next. With global markets evolving and growing pressure on public pension systems, she says we must continue to make smart, forward-looking investment decisions, which you do. She remains committed to working with the board and the entire investment team to strengthen retirement security for our members and ensure the long-term sustainability of the fund. In addition, she proudly congratulates Christy and April. By the way, 2 more women in the top leadership, and on your promotion, and she wishes you both well. And with that, I'll back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rufino. Any public comments for the item 3, which is the CIO report?
There are no public comment for this item.
Thanks, Samantha. Item 4, we'll begin our semi-annual reports, beginning with the general semi-annual report. Makita, Steve McCourt, Alan Emkin. Welcome, Steve. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Chair Keeley. Good to be here. We have new technology up here as well, so hopefully we're using it correctly.
I'm still waiting for my teenage daughters to come over and help me out, but they're not here. Where are they?
Very good. You all received from us our semi-annual open and closed session reports. We have a few slides that will guide us through the open session report here. I will highlight a few key takeaways from our semi-annual report, and Alan and I will spotlight 2 risks in the marketplace today for your consideration as well. To start, let me just highlight that as a reminder, Makita conducts semi-annual reviews for you once every 6 months, of course, and there's really 2 components of our evaluation. RFIs that are completed by staff in each of the asset classes, and interviews that we conduct with the directors of each asset class. And that process was executed this semi-annual period as it has been in the past. Our conclusion from our reviews is that the CalSTRS staff continues to operate at a very high level, and we'll highlight some of the performance of the portfolio next. But before shifting there, we do want to highlight that past performance is never a predictor of future performance, and a lot of what we look at in evaluating staff's true performance in managing the portfolio is the processes, the strategies, the approach that they take across asset classes, which we see as both best in class and ever improving as well. On the first slide here on key takeaways, we highlight the performance that Scott just went through. I want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, the total portfolio returns over the trailing 1, 3, 5, and 10 years ranged between 7.7% and 9.5% per year. These are higher returns than most would expect over long periods of time. And that's largely a consequence of, for the most part, U.S. equity markets being in a bull market now for the last 15 years. And as many have highlighted, when we're and you are reviewing portfolios and looking at designing portfolios that are resilient and performing over the long term, you assume, rightly so, that there will be recessions, there will be bear markets. But we're looking at a time period now where there's an extended period in the U.S. anyway of strong equity market returns. The portfolio that CalSTRS staff manages for you has produced returns in excess of the policy benchmark for each of the periods that are shown here, which is a nice result, of course. The more current periods, the portfolio has produced returns somewhat below the return of the median pension plan and the reference portfolio over the trailing 1 and 3 years. That's a consequence of really two factors. One, your portfolio has somewhat higher allocations to private market assets than the average peer. And of course, the reference portfolio does not include any private market assets in it. So during periods where generally equity markets run up considerably as they have, private markets lag and performance lags those benchmarks as a consequence. The other reason, of course, is you have a asset class called risk mitigating strategies that's specifically designed to mitigate risk that those benchmarks, for the most part, don't include. And so both of those factors led to the performance somewhat underperforming those benchmarks over recent periods. But over the 10-year period, the returns have exceeded the average peer and the reference portfolio. We continue to spotlight the global equity and fixed income asset classes, largely because your portfolios in these areas have done particularly well relative to others that we see in the marketplace, particularly on the equity side. The equity markets have been very challenging for most to meet or exceed over recent years because the markets have been driven increasingly by ever fewer large technology companies and have become ever more concentrated. When markets become more concentrated, it's generally more challenging to outperform them. Your portfolio, the global equity portfolio on the top left, you can see returned 13.9% per year over the last 5 years and 10.4% per year over the last 10 years. Beating your policy benchmark, of course, but compared to the broader global equity index over the last 10 years, it outperformed by 70 basis points per year. Your policy benchmark for the last 10 years was actually a higher hurdle than the global equity benchmark that most investors use. And compared to the peer group median, you can see peers underperformed even the benchmarks quite considerably. In addition to this, your portfolio has produced the returns that you see with somewhat lower risk than the broader benchmarks. And as a consequence, your Sharpe ratio, which is a measure of risk-adjusted return, is very strong over this time period. So we continue to highlight this as an area of excellence within the CalSTRS portfolio. And similarly, while the fixed income markets have not enjoyed the absolute level of returns that equities have, because interest rates over the 5 and 10-year period went from 0 to something today that's higher than 0. Absolute returns are lower, but on a relative basis to policy and the Bloomberg Aggregate Index, which is the broad investment grade index, the portfolios on a relative and risk-adjusted basis have done very well. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Alan to speak to the first big risk that we'll highlight.
It worked. One big risk to focus on is the level of the price-earnings ratio of the broad U.S. equity market. And as you look at the chart, it really gives you a good sense of the volatility of the price-earnings ratio over time, and that's how much money you spend for $1 of earnings on a multiple basis. And historically, it's about 17.5%, I just got some quick numbers. Currently, the S&P is trading at 22.5%, a significant premium over history. The Mag 7 is trading at 28.3%, and the broad market minus the Mag 7 is at 21.8%. So even when you take the Mag 7, which represents about 35% of the S&P 500, out of the equation, the market's trading at a premium to historic levels. One never knows when, but if you look at the chart, and you can see when you have the top of these mountains, at some point, it goes in the other direction and generates something closer to a historical level of valuation. This is something that is well known. It's something you can do next to nothing about other than have a very well diversified portfolio, which was exactly what Scott was talking about when he did his introduction, and why you have the RMS, and why you have fixed income, and why you have asset classes that are not highly correlated with domestic stocks. That's it.
Great. And the final big risk we're going to highlight here in open session is the potential for waning independence of government data and the Federal Reserve. This is a more recent trend. The more significant event that moved markets over the last several months, at least for a few days, was the administration's vocal opposition to Chairman Powell in his position at the Federal Reserve. There has been a long-standing understanding that the Federal Reserve, as the central bank of the U.S., operates most effectively if it operates outside of the realm of politics, left or right, regardless of administration. The Fed is responsible for independently assessing the risks in the economy and managing interest rate policy for what's called a dual mandate, which is tricky. The dual mandate is to maximize employment and to maintain inflation at a stable level, which the Fed has said is roughly 2%. Political influence has the potential to change the Federal Reserve's calculus on how it adjusts interest rates to those two objectives, which ultimately means that the likelihood of the Fed achieving those two objectives is somewhat less, which is negative for the economy, either because you have a greater chance of recession or a greater chance of inflation, both of which are bad. So there's been a long-standing understanding that the Federal Reserve and all central banks operate best when they are clear of political influence. The administration, most vocally in early July, began critiquing the Fed's decisions not to lower interest rates. The market for a couple of days headed south pretty significantly, and the administration backed off, at least temporarily, on its attempt to influence the Federal Reserve's interest rate policy. In late July and early August, the administration terminated the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because of a jobs report that came out from that department. Markets again reacted somewhat negatively to this news because, again, government agencies that are responsible for independently and objectively collecting data and information on the economy operate best when they operate outside of the realm of political influence. And this certainly triggered people's instinct that political influence was possible here. The markets since have settled down and have provided some stability There haven't been other examples since then of influence from the administration. But we wanted to highlight this because it's a risk that we're not used to dealing with in the marketplace. It's a relatively new risk in the last year, and one that may or may not, result in significant volatility in the markets. But given that there's been a couple of instances where market volatility has arisen from these actions, we wanted to highlight it here. Final thing we'll highlight about it is, in addition to near-term market volatility, ultimately the biggest cost to political interference in Fed policy or government data collection is it erodes the confidence of investors in our economy and the capital markets. And that erosion of confidence ultimately means a higher premium that we pay for capital. All else equal, higher yields, higher risk premiums on equities, and foreign investors require more expected return to invest their capital in the U.S. So that's the second big risk we wanted to highlight here amongst the infinite number of risks we could highlight for you. With that, that concludes our open session semi-annual report, and we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
We have a couple of members in the queue. Steve Juarez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To Stephen Ellen. So we have traditionally been very heavily concentrated in the U.S., whether it's private equities, public equities, fixed rate instruments, real estate. Wondering whether what you've posed here as potential risk, coupled with the fact that, as we read the tea leaves, does it start to suggest to us that we want to be more diversified in terms of our geographic placement, primarily in the U.S., and start to look at opportunities in all those fields elsewhere?
I'll provide a response, and maybe Alan wants to add on as well. There's several considerations, and we know staff is reviewing, and we'll be reviewing this deeply before the next asset allocation process. A few things to highlight. You and almost every U.S.-based pension plan is invested predominantly in U.S. assets. Your fund today probably is more diversified outside the U.S. than it was 10 years ago. Your equity portfolio used to have a U.S. bias, more of a U.S. bias towards it, and you've worked to globalize that over the last decade. But that being said, there are many asset classes where you are exclusively, or more or less exclusively, U.S.-based in the fixed income markets, in the private markets. And in addition, the U.S. market share of the global capital markets has increased significantly over the last couple of decades. Roughly 20 years ago, the global capital markets were roughly one half comprised of the U.S. and one half comprised of equities outside the U.S. Today, the U.S. represents nearly 70% of the global capital markets, or at the beginning of the year it did. So just being a diversified investor in the global economy has meant that you become more U.S.-centric over time because U.S. stocks have appreciated so much more than foreign stocks. So because of all those factors, it's certainly worth reviewing the merits of diversification outside the U.S. The one other consideration I would highlight, however, is U.S. defined benefit plans like yourselves pay your liabilities in U.S. dollars. So absent currency hedging outside the U.S., when you invest your capital outside the U.S., you're taking on another dimension of risk as well, which has to be considered in the equation. Anything you want to add to that, Alan?
The the argument for the superior domestic performance was this concept of American exceptionalism. I am a firm believer that that is not over, that we still have the greatest minds, we still have the most open economy, and we still have the most belief in competition. But to the extent that American exceptionalism has limits and that there's pressures against it at this time, I think that the level of the premium associated with exceptionalism will diminish. And absent something pretty dramatic happening regarding public policy, it's going to be hard to attract the kind of ideas and creativity that created the wealth that it's created to date.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Steve. And I know in June's panel, presentations later in open and closed session, we'll be looking at total fund management and a forward-looking basis as well. And this might continue as part of that conversation. Mr. Ruffino and then Mr. Gunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Makita and the team for the very thorough report. And thank you, by the way, too, for the briefings before this meeting. Really appreciate that you took the time to do that. With respect to risks and opportunity, Alan, you mentioned that a diversified portfolio is a very important part of maintaining this fund. So which markets or asset classes does staff believe present the most compelling opportunities for CalSTRS to enhance long-term returns given current valuations and global trends?
If I really knew the answer to that question, I might not share it, Mr. Ruffino. And that's not being humble. That's 45 years of experience of never really having gotten it right. The whole concept of diversification really is a recognition that no one knows. There are certain big picture items. Why you want to be in equities is tradition, whether it's public or private, is you know that they have historically had the highest rate of return, and there's a belief that long term they will. In the short term, looking at that valuation that we looked at just a short while ago, you could be disappointed, but that's why you have other parts of the portfolio which during those periods, and we'll discuss this in closed session, where you expect those other parts of the portfolio to do well, whether it's fixed income, RMS, part of the private markets. But no one really knows where the future will fall, particularly in the short term. And so the key is diversification. Steve?
Yeah, I want to add to that. It was a great answer.
And
Thank
Frank,
you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. I think one of the things I try to continue to remind myself, and we heard it in Steve's comments about the amount of risk, the Sharpe ratio that we exceeded returns for the amount of risk we're taking, is the mindset of how much risk do we want the staff to be taking with this portfolio to achieve its objectives. And go back to some of the speakers we had at the offsite in July, you can see the connecting of the dots. How much risk do we need to take to achieve the outcome? And I think we can't, and then Scott's challenging us to really think about the next 10 years relative to how the world is changing and how what worked the last 10 years may not work for the next 10 years, and how do we think about that as well as not just the returns, but how much risk are we taking to get that return? Michael.
Thank you.
Mr. Gunning.
Now, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're all figuring out technology. I'm just thinking about the big risks, and the question is to both of you. You didn't mention Lisa Cook, so clearly administration's back on this effort with the Federal Reserve, and it's troubling because you've outlined what could happen, and I guess that's really the question as a portfolio. Can we prepare for something like this, or what thoughts, or is there any other time in history, Alan, that you can recollect that is similar to now?
The sad answer to that is not in the United States, but I could point to a variety of other jurisdictions, Turkey, Argentina, where politicians have decided that they should drive economic policy, whether it's through central banks or statistics. And it's very hard to find examples where that has resulted in good results.
Thank you, Mr. Gunning. Any other questions? Steve, you did bring up Chairman Powell, and I don't, one of the things I respect about him and observing him over all these years, he's been so calm amidst tremendous pressure. And I admire that about him, where he has been grilled, attacked personally, and he has stayed steady to what the mandate is of the Federal Reserve. And if he said it once, he said it 1,000 times. That's not our mandate, with all due respect. And it's, for someone like me, he's a great example of staying focused on what his job is. And I think that's extremely, extremely admirable under the amount of pressure that he's faced. So I just want to make that as a commentary, as a continued learner, a student myself that hopes to continue to learn. Who can I learn from? And he's, I think, a tremendous example of that. Steady hand. Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. Our next semi-annual report is from RFA, Ben and Taylor, the real estate semi-annual report. Welcome, guys.
Mr. Keeley, do we have any comments?
Oh, thank you, Lamont. Thank you, Mr. King. Any public comments on the semi-annual report? Makita.
There's no public comment on this item.
Thanks, Lamont. Thank you, Samantha. Good morning, Ben, Taylor. Good to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. Ben Maslin with RCLCO Fund Advisors. Good morning, everyone. I will talk about the real estate portfolio's performance, and then Taylor will be talking about the market. So if we look at performance, the long-term performance of the portfolio continued to outperform its benchmarks. It outperformed the benchmark Odyssey Index by about 100 basis points over the 5 and 10-year periods. And if you remove the legacy assets, which continue to exist, they are investments that were made prior to the great financial crisis that were in closed-end structures that have a long tail. If you remove those, then performance, the 10-year number rises to 170 basis points. Real estate has essentially experienced the worst 3-year performance period since the great financial crisis. And that's reflected in the 3 years numbers there, where values are down about 20% from peak. And over that 3-year period, the CalSTRS real estate portfolio essentially matched the benchmark. Over the past year, we're starting to see values stabilize. And the real estate portfolio's performance actually trailed the benchmark. That's been due primarily to a continued over-allocation to office properties and greater leverage than the benchmark, with magnified returns. But there's a lot of noise in short-term performance. There's a lot of volatility in short-term performance. Our focus is on the long-term performance, and over the long term, there's been continued outperformance relative to the benchmark. With regards to the compliance and allocation, I'd like to just focus on the left-hand chart, which is the allocation to real estate. So our report there's a lag in the data. Our report's as of March 2025. So as of March, you were at about a 13.3% allocation compared to a target allocation of 15%. If you look at where we are as of the end of July, which is the most recent number, you're at about 12.8%, so about 220 basis points below target. The reason for that under allocation is really that global equities, public equities have been in a very strong bull market and are at record highs, and real estate's been in a bear market for the last 3 years, and so that has led to a lower percentage of the portfolio being in real estate. The good news is that this is, as Taylor will get to in a moment on the market, this is a good time to have dry powder available in the real estate sector because of the correction that we've experienced over the last 3 years. And then just looking at allocations within the portfolio and what I mentioned earlier, there continues to be on the left-hand side, you can see an over-allocation to office and under-allocation to industrial and apartment, multifamily property types, and that has contributed to the short-term returns that we saw earlier. And with that, I'll turn it over to Taylor to talk about the market.
Yeah, thank you. We've been highlighted the challenges of the last 3 years in real estate, material underperformance relative to long-term trend. That's primarily a result of increased interest rates, which increased the cost of capital that investors expect for their real estate investments. That decreases the valuations. In addition, over the last few years, we saw both historic levels of new supply, particularly in multifamily and industrial, that wasn't necessarily immediately absorbed, impacting operating performance. And we all know about what's happened in office for the last few years as well. Now, however, we do seem to be at an inflection point for real estate, really in spite of all of the noise that we see throughout the economy. Real estate ultimately is a fairly simple asset class that follows what's going on in the economy, technology, demographics, and so on. And we are entering a period of time where valuations have largely reset and seem to have stabilized at that low point. And supply, or the creation of new supply, is diminishing rapidly. I'll just share 2 slides that make this point. First, it measures the percentage of the new supply as a percentage of total inventory. So, if you have 100 apartment buildings, what percentage of of those buildings are being constructed at this point in time? And you can see that really starting last year, the preponderance of construction started diminishing very rapidly, is projected to continue to diminish. This is actually a fairly easy statistic to forecast given developers pull permits, and the lack of new permits being pulled indicates limited new supply going forward. And so we're reaching a point very quickly where the development of new residential and new industrial will be below long-term historical averages. Office and retail were already quite low, which should drive rent growth and NOI performance for real estate. And then secondly, real estate pricing, which has been declining for 3 years, has started to rebound. All property types, with the exception of office, went into positive territory on a year-over-year basis in the second quarter, and all are continuing to improve on the low point that they all hit in 2024. There are some risks to this inflection point perspective. We could see more inflation. And it has turned out to be fairly sticky. If that leads the central banks to maintain high interest rates or potentially even increase them further, that could negatively impact values of not just real estate, but all assets. And then there is a risk of recession as well, which would reduce demand and negatively impact operating performance. Overall, however, our view is that the opportunity to invest in real estate seems to be attractive at a time, as Ben mentioned, when CalSTRS has dry powder to invest in it. We would even say at this point in time that there is some urgency to do so. So we'll pause right there and open up the discussion to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Taylor. Mr. Ruffino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report. I want to ask a question regarding office investments. So, given the overweight, right, in office investments and the outlook for elevated vacancies and declining leasing activities, what is the rationale behind maintaining this exposure? And what contingency measures are in place should this trend persist?
Sure. So the staff is hard at work and has been for several years at reducing the exposure to office. And in fact, if you're just looking at conventional office, it's the percentage allocation as compared to the benchmark has reduced dramatically and is really on par with the benchmark. What CalSTRS real estate team is now working through is a very heavy allocation to life sciences real estate, laboratory space for development of pharmaceuticals and so on. And the challenge in both that space as well as office is that the market has been relatively illiquid, meaning it's been very difficult to sell those assets. And so staff is engaged in really trying to strike the balance between reducing exposure and not necessarily selling or letting go of assets at below market values or at values below where they potentially will be within the next few years. But the discussion, how do we reduce this office exposure, is fairly constant within the real estate team. It's not being maintained out of a sense that things are going to get materially better. It's being maintained in order to prudently manage through some fundamental challenges within that portfolio.
And just to add a little historical context, when we were first hired, your office allocation was, I think, close to 45% of the total real estate portfolio. Today, you're at about 20% or so, or a little over 20%, and about half of that now is life sciences. So you've made a conscious effort to reduce the traditional office allocation. Life sciences is the one that Taylor mentioned.
Good to hear.
Thank
you.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other comment that I would make is the challenges associated with meaningfully changing allocations in a large portfolio such as this in a relatively illiquid asset class suggests always being on the alert for potential changes that are taking place in the economy and making shifts early in order to potentially benefit from them over the long term, which is why, again, we say this is a good vintage period. We should be making investments, and why staff is focused on identifying those property types that are likely to outperform in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. That's it, Ben and Taylor. We'll see you in closed session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next semi-annual report is the private equity. This is John Haggerty and Ryan Marie Decker from Makita.
Mr. Keeley, do we have any comment on item 4B?
Any public comments on the semi-annual, real estate semi-annual report?
There's no public comment on this item.
Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you. Good to see you both.
So we've got
we have a portfolio that's in compliance with guidelines in your policy statements, and it's also highly diversified, picking up on some of the themes we've just talked about. So here I'll speak a little bit about the asset class. There's been a lot of talk about private equity and the reasons for committing to it, and I'll underscore, as I have many times, that return is first of mind when thinking about this asset class. Historically, you have earned, since inception of the private equity program, on an annualized basis, 13.1% return. And that's been very, very helpful to achieving your goals with the asset allocation program. On a go-forward basis, the numbers are expected to be somewhat lower than that. Makita's own capital market expectations, which align pretty closely with the other consultants in the industry, show a 10-year projection of almost 10% And then on a 20-year basis, taking into account some of the higher prices we see today, that's 11.2%. So this has been it has been your best performing asset class, and our expectation on a go-forward basis is that it will be as well. We're not the only people that think that. There are surveys that are done annually of institutional investors for what their intentions are with respect to asset allocation and private equity. And we quote one here that was done by McKinsey, which showed that almost 85% of limited partners are either going to maintain or increase their private equity allocations in 2025. The other part of the equation is very specific to CalSTRS and CalSTRS advantages. And you're able to do this because you have the right people, and you have people in place and a culture and a team and experience and a reputation that allows you to do that. Most critically, you're getting co-investment deal flow because the people that you get it from know that you can turn the investment around quickly, make a decision, and have communicated very clearly on the capital that you have available and why it fits your program. Your scale gives you the opportunity to negotiate fees and to explore separate account structures, which are cheaper for the plan. And furthermore, with a team of over 30 people with a very, very long tenure in the business, you have access to information in these private markets that's very helpful. So not everyone can achieve those numbers, in my opinion. Industry trends we show on the next slide. These are things that we've talked about in the past. The fundraising environment is slower. There are a number of groups that are above their target allocation of private equity. You're no different. You're at 16% versus a 14% target. So that is causing a general slowdown in raising capital for individual funds. It doesn't mean that sentiment is horrible. It simply means that groups do not have the room within their asset allocation to deploy more. We did see a small pickup. This is potentially a sign of a pickup in sentiment with fundraising, because we have had a number of quarters where the denominator effect has abated a bit as the public stocks have outperformed private equity. And you saw that private equity funds secured in the first half of 2025 an amount meaningfully more than they did a year prior. Exit activity we've talked about quite a bit. This is to pick up on some of the risks that were talked about by Steve and Alan. This is one of the things that we're watching very closely. We've seen a slowdown in distributions, and we've seen an extension of the hold periods for private equity funds. It's something that we're watching. Related to that, there have been the offering of what are called continuation vehicles, or CVs. And these are an opportunity to get liquidity before the natural sale process for an investment in a private equity portfolio. Your staff noting numbers of things, including the fact that you're 200 basis points over the target for private equity, have opted in many cases to take liquidity as opposed to extending your exposure to individual assets through these continuation vehicles. And that's consistent with what we're seeing across the number of limited partners. Financial Times did a survey recently, and roughly 90% of limited partners have elected in the last couple of years to take liquidity as opposed to rolling capital into these vehicles. And then lastly, I'll say that the returns, you'll see them later, are somewhat down from the last semi-report that we showed, but they're very strong. They're above your assumed rate of return comfortably at about 8.5% for the trailing year. But for the industry itself, the returns through March were 7.6, and that figure we showed you 6 months ago was close to 9%. On a go-forward basis, we are seeing some improvement in transaction activity. The reason we're seeing the slowdown in distributions, of course, is because deals aren't happening at the same pace that they have historically. And that's a result of a number of things that you've heard about from your real estate team, from the other private market asset classes, that there's a little bit of uncertainty, and with uncertainty, buyers and sellers can't agree upon a price. And then compounding that, of course, is the higher interest rates that have caused for different mathematics in underwriting individual deals, and in some cases has caused some transactions to be paused to make sure that they actually hit and achieve the underwriting case for a private equity deal.
No, I just was going to mention that Mr. Juarez is in the queue, but we'll let you finish your comments and I'll go to questions.
Great. Just
John.
two more comments on this page. One has to do with the new administration. It's really hard for us to really say anything definitive about what effect it's having specifically on private equity. Perhaps the biggest effect is higher interest rates. And we note that this is a very long-term asset class that when you look at it from the perspective of the hold period on an individual deal that can be 7, 8 years, administrations come and go, and often in the grand scheme of things seem to have very little impact on the results. It depends on the industry. Some industries are actually being helped by the current policies that are being put in place. Lastly, I'll mention venture capital, which is facing continued disruption. It's only 8% of your portfolio, so it's not a big part of what your team invests in. But we're seeing evidence that some of the most recent vintage years were priced very high, and when things are priced very high, they can come crashing down. Your bias within your portfolio, results of your scale, is towards later stage, larger investments within venture capital. And with that, I'll take Mr. Juarez's question.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve?
I'm curious, do you track separately investments that we initiate versus those that we access through the traditional asset managers that come to us with deals? Do we have a way in which we can look at both and see what the relative performance of is each? Obviously, one of the reasons we do this is we're trying to reduce our cost. But in terms of performance, I'm wondering whether we track separately the two different approaches to the market, or for that matter, where we're co-managers.
Would you like me to respond
Sure.
on that, John? So this is a perfect cue up for the collaborative model report that's coming out in November, because we have tracked that in different forms. It's not tracking absolutely everything, but for example, if we look at private equity, we'll be tracking our co-investments, which is our form of extending the collaborative model in private equity, versus our LP investments. And through that, we get an understanding of the overall fees we're paying.
That's on fees. We also do it for performance as well?
And we do it for performance as well.
Okay. That was my question. So, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And welcome, Ms. Decker. I think this is the first time you've presented.
Yes.
Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you very much. So the next few slides review the performance of your private equity portfolio, and these numbers are as of the end of March. So you can see, and as John alluded to, performance has been very strong over you can see the 1, 3, 5, and 10-year periods. The portfolio is outperforming the custom State Street Index across all those trailing periods. And that index is indicative of broader private equity market performance. So your portfolio is outperforming the private equity market. And that's really testament to an appropriate portfolio construction across underlying sub-strategies. It's a testament to your staff's skill in selecting the best managers. And it's also a testament to some of the performance that's coming in from the co-investment activity, which we'll touch on shortly. You can see that performance relative to the custom benchmark is also outperforming in the 1, 5, and 10-year periods. There is some underperformance in the 3-year period. And as Steve talked about earlier, so that custom benchmark is actually indicative of global public equity market performance. And so in periods of strong public equity performance, private markets can underperform. So that's why you see that negative 3.1 underperformance in the 3-year time period. That custom benchmark is actually more relevant in longer time frames, 10 years and longer. So if you look at the 10-year relative performance of your portfolio to that custom benchmark, you can see that your portfolio is outperforming by 2.5%. Here you can see the performance of the underlying strategies in your portfolio: buyouts, venture, debt-related, and special mandates, all relative to their specific strategy indices. One thing to remember is that your greatest exposure is to buyouts. That's currently 77% of your program NAV. And you'll also see that that strategy is outperforming its strategy benchmarks across all trailing periods very strongly. So that that sub-strategy is really driving some of the outperformance of your portfolio. Across the other strategies, you can see positive performance, but you do see some mixed performance relative to their strategy benchmarks, which John also spoke to a bit earlier. So venture on a 10-year return, that's 12.1%, debt-related 8%, and special mandates 9.1% on a 10-year basis. And despite the relative underperformance to those benchmarks, because these are smaller allocations within your portfolio, they're having less of an impact on your overall program performance. And this next slide here covers your contributions from your fund investment portfolio and then that co-investment portfolio, which you are increasingly implementing. So the fund portfolio today is still about 3/4 of your exposure, so that performance continues to drive your overall performance. That said, your exposure to co-investments is increasing. Today it's 24%. A year ago it was 22%, and about 5 years ago it was 11%. So that's the implementation of the collaborative model you have been pursuing. And you can see how, on a relative basis, those co-investments are strongly outperforming the fund investments across all periods there. And this is really, this is due to the increased allocation to structures that have no fee, no carry. The other thing I'd like to point out, your private equity staff noted that they're increasingly collaborating with their CIS colleagues in sourcing some opportunities for those co-investments.
Here, I'll simply mention very, very strong performance since inception on the non-North America piece of the portfolio, 13.9% versus 11.4% since inception, 250 basis points advantage since inception. This we show with each of our reports and make the caveat that the 2021 figure was not an attempt to time the market in any way, but rather it's an artifact of how the vintage years are classified. So that's a combination of assets that were committed in 2020 as well as those that were committed for 2022, but got classified technically for that year. So the point of this is to show an amazing amount of consistency through time, from 2017 through the present, of very consistent exposure to the private equity market. 1/4 of the commitments on a go-forward basis are in the co-investment format.
And this next slide just demonstrates that you continue to be compliant in terms of overall allocations to underlying strategies with your target ranges and also your interim target. So currently, private equity is roughly 16% of your total portfolio, and your interim target is 14%.
And to wrap it up, the performance is very strong. The current NAV at $56 billion is just at 16% of the total fund, a little bit over the long-term target. Compliance with key parameters in terms of diversification. Scale is helpful and also a challenge at times. And so what I will highlight here, the new information, which is exciting to me, is the establishment of subcommittees for fund investment and co-investment by Margot and leadership on the private equity team to allow for specialization and developing leadership in the lower ranks of the team. Related to that also is the help of the San Diego office in creating great morale that we observe, and also
Don't get ahead of ourselves. We're only in San Francisco. I know there's a desire to
Did I
be in
say
San
San Diego?
Diego, but San Francisco.
Excuse me, San Francisco
Yeah,
office.
the city by the bay.
And some of the new recruiting has come to that office, and it's been nice. That concludes our report.
Thank you, Ms. Decker and Mr. Haggerty. I don't see any, I do see a couple people. So we have Ms. Bradford.
Good morning. With co-investments now representing roughly 1/4 of the private equity program, have any new risks emerged? And are there established frameworks in place to effectively monitor and mitigate these risks?
I feel your policies are well designed to mitigate the major risk which exists with co-investments. You're taking a more concentrated bet on an individual company that you probably already have within one of your private equity funds. You do have the ability to invest outside of existing funds, but most of the time you already have exposure to that asset. You're just getting more of it. So the key is doing enough of the deals in a given year to diversify away that specific risk to that company, and I feel the policies are working well to eliminate that risk.
Thank you, Ms. Bradford. Mr. Ruffino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I ask the question, I wanted to reflect on one of your quote. I think I'm going to quote what you said, Mr. Haggerty. I hope I got it right. But you said during your presentation something to this effect, quote, "Not everyone can achieve these numbers, in my opinion." And so that's great news, and I hope that's a quote that we can continually get from you every time you report to us. Good job, staff. As you look across the portfolio, right, are there regions or maybe sectors where concentration naturally builds? And how do you think about balancing that over the long term?
So these are conversations that we have with your staff very frequently, and it gets to diversification. The other thing that one needs to remember about portfolio construction in most of the private markets, particularly private equity though, is it's largely a bottom-up process, where the first order decision is not what sector should we be in, but rather who are the best partners with the best track record, the best people, the best processes for us to partner with over a long period of time. And with time, there are guardrails around that. So if that process of bottom up led you to have too much in venture capital, there's a guardrail in your policy for that. If there was too much that existed within a sector like healthcare or technology, there's a guardrail to protect against that. But to answer your question, I think most directly, that the better performing sectors tend to garner more attention and they get more deal flow. And recently that there has been quite a bit in the technology space and software space. And it's incumbent upon the team to take a look at their exposures over time and make sure that they are not increasing allocations without having a specific reason to do so to individual sectors. The other overlay would be geography, and it follows the same pattern that I just mentioned. You're mostly looking for the best opportunities rather than putting as a first priority that you need to be in Europe first over the United States or the reverse at any given point in time. I'm comfortable with the processes for diversification. The better performing sectors tend to get a little bit more concentration, like healthcare and technology with time.
That's good to hear, because what motivated me to asking the question is whether we, and I think we do, I think you said based on policy, but we as a committee should monitor as potential risk to the long-term resiliency. And if I understood you correctly, you're saying our policy addresses and we constantly monitor any potential risk. Am I correct?
That's correct, and more importantly, the processes, the day-to-day processes of your team ensure that as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ruffino. Ms. Yamamoto, Karen.
Hi. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi up there. When you talked about go-forward commentary, you talked about venture capital and about AI having a significant area of investment. And we've been talking about AI for several months now. And so what does it mean that there's growing concern? What are you talking about when you explain that to me?
So with respect to artificial intelligence, it's like so many new technologies, it's a massive opportunity and it's also a risk in some ways, mostly with respect to disruption. I refer to the internet, and 25 years ago is probably my best case study for understanding what's happening. the people that will win quite likely are those that use it as a tool, and those can be garden variety businesses in your buyout portfolio. And then there are those that will win from building the tool and the infrastructure around it. And some of that is in your private equity portfolio, but not a lot. There's some in the venture portfolio that are specifically gaining from creating the tools rather than, and the infrastructure around it, rather than those that will benefit from using the tools. So that's kind of how I think about it within your private equity portfolio. It's a somewhat different story in the liquid portfolios with chip makers and others that are making things that are part of the infrastructure that you necessarily can't access through the private market portfolio. So risks within the venture portfolio, generally speaking, have to do with just high prices. High prices were paid, and the only disruption of businesses that I can think of relate to software, where the costs of creating software and developing an enterprise software business, which is funded quite a bit by venture capital, is reduced, and so such that when there's a ton of capital that's invested in it, and someone can come along with a smaller amount of capital and use AI for coding, for example, that you can create a much lower cost competitor to some of the existing venture funded software businesses.
So we're looking for those kinds of venture capital investments to kind of
Not
help with
specifically,
that
I can't speak to
disruption, or-
your team, but they're partnering with best of breed venture capital firms that are delegated the decision to select investments that will win in both of those categories.
Maybe that's not appropriate for open.
Yeah, maybe we'll move some of that into
We'll
closed.
move on.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yamamoto. Are there any public comments for the semi-annual private equity report?
There are no members of the public in the queue for this item.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Ryan, Marie. So a little agenda management. We're going to take a brief 5-minute break, and we're going to come back and we're going to hear the 3 semi-annual reports in closed session. So our break will be for 5 minutes, and we'll come back into closed session. At 1 p.m., we'll reconvene in open session across the way there. So we'll take a break. Scott.
Yes, and so just following on what you're saying, Chair Harry, is that what we intend to do is move the item number 5, the Total Fund Management Division update, to after the shared vision item, which is item number 14.
Yep.
So we'll be moving from the American River Room back here in open session, cover item 5, and then we'll begin a closed session with item 13, which is the closed session portion of the Total Fund Management update. And I think that's probably what you're referring to, but I just want to make a finer point that we're moving those 2 items.
Yep, that's what we're doing. Good. Thank you very much. So we'll take a short 5-minute break and then come back and close. Thanks. We're back in open session, and this is item 5, and June Kim and Josh Diedish will be presenting Total Fund Management. This is open session, and we also have a closed session item later in the day on the same topic, and Alan and Steve are accompanying them. June, I'll turn it over to you.
So I'm June Kim. I'm your Senior Investment Director, Total Fund Management Division. I'm joined by Josh Diedish, who is a Senior Portfolio Manager on the same team. We're here to provide you with an update on the build-out of the Total Fund Management Division. We will refer to it as TFM, using acronyms as we like to do around here. This is a new division that was started July 1st of last year, so we've been around for over a year. The functions existed for years in other areas of the total fund, but it was centralized under TFM. We came to this committee in January of this year to introduce the team to you and the functions. We focus on 3 key areas, which were covered in a slide earlier today, but those 3 areas are asset allocation. It's the longer-term strategic asset allocation study, the ALM, that happens every 4 years, but we also do the shorter-term tactical asset allocation, portfolio risk for the total fund, and then balance sheet, which is the newest vertical that we've been working on, and that includes liquidity and leverage management for the total fund. So that's to level set. This past fiscal year, as part of a mandate that Scott, taking on his role as CIO, asked us to do, we completed a risk assessment of the total fund. Why did we do this? This is to confirm that we don't have any gaps in the portfolio versus our policy benchmark. This is part of the regular monitoring and the management of the total fund that we do and the reporting that comes to this committee. But to go through an exercise like this in a periodic manner, we think it's good practice. And so that was the exercise we went through. We worked with 2 of our external partners, Bridgewater and Alborn. And so some of you may know these firms very well. Bridgewater has more of a public markets lens, and they're very quantitative and have a lot of expertise in those markets. We wanted to pair that with a partner that has more of a private markets lens, given the construct of our fund. And so we worked with Alborn, who is also a well-known advisor for our fund, working with our private equity team, and they also know our RMS portfolio very well. And we matched that with analysis that the TFM team did internally. And so in the memo that is in item 5, we've summarized what the findings were. There are no unknown exposures or unknown risks that we have in the fund versus our policy benchmark, so that was good for us to confirm. And there weren't any surprises that we were unaware of that we found after we completed this assessment. The findings, we've already spoken about this a bit today, has to do with exposures in the fund currently. We have the largest exposure in the fund is to equity and growth. Those are the largest sources of risk. And then we also have a concentrated exposure to the U.S. Again, there's reasons for this, and these are discussions that have happened regularly over the years. And these exposures have served us well in delivering the performance that we need. And the question that we have as we look forward is what will continue to drive success for us in terms of our fund's performance, and how do we want to think about positioning. And we'll speak more about maybe some opportunities that we have found as a result of this exercise, and we'll speak to that in the related closed session item, which is item 13. I'm going to turn it to Josh now to share a bit about the team build-out and what's been happening there.
Great, thank you. So I've just had a couple of things that I wanted to update the committee on. For those who are new, you weren't here, but for those who do remember, back in May, we came with a policy update for the securities lending program, and that was part of the transition. That team had been in fixed income from its inception in the early 1990s. And so we were moving the securities lending team to the balance sheet team within Total Fund Management on July 1st. So we successfully completed that transition. That program and that team is really a core part of our balance sheet efforts and has added a lot of value throughout its history, and we're looking forward to building on that going forward. So in addition to taking on the securities lending team, we're actively building. We have open recruitments in a couple of different areas for the head of risk, and then a couple of positions on the balance sheet side, investment officer positions there as well. And so that's a big focus for us, and will continue to be over the next few years as we build out the team and build on the success that we've had in the past, and really realize the value of that. And then we also were able earlier this year to hire an investment officer for the asset allocation team. He came from academia and is already adding value in our efforts there as we look to build on, again, the success we've had with our strategic asset allocation and the annual and tactical allocation efforts that we we have on the team. So, really wanted to just provide that as a brief update. We had talked about coming back to the committee at least a couple of times a year to provide an update as we build the team, and I think we're making good progress. So turn it back to June. I think she wanted to make some closing comments on some internal communication.
I have to push it. It's not AI, it doesn't just start, okay? Thank you. Josh and I just completed actually what we're calling a TFM roadshow with our internal units within investments. And so we've gone into a little bit deeper detail with each of the teams individually to share what the risk assessment found, what we'll be doing in the upcoming fiscal year, and then the deep dive research that we'll be doing around some of the opportunities that we found. And so that's one aspect in terms of sharing what we will be doing and what offerings we can do to collaborate with our asset classes. And then the other way, it was very useful for us to hear what the investment teams are seeing and what they're thinking of in terms of pacing and what they see as opportunities as they look out over the next 6, 12, 18 months. We're gearing up to get ready for the annual asset allocation plan for 2026. So as we go into the last few months of this calendar year, we'll be focused on that, again, working with each of the asset classes around pacing and liquidity. And that annual asset allocation plan will serve as a roadmap for us for 2026. So we'll end it there and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, something occurred to me. So given the structure that you've now developed with your 4 senior directors, and the fact that June's shop sort of interacts with the rest of the folks, how do you resolve areas where you may not necessarily agree?
You're really getting down to it, Steve. Yeah. Well, this is a team approach. And so if you think about it, they each are leading significant strategic priorities. And so, Geraldine with the shared vision, April with tech transformation, and Kirsty and June both on the one fund approach. So if you think about leading any one of those significant strategic priorities across the entire investment branch, you need the other 3 and vice versa. And so everything that they're doing, they're leading out on some very significant initiatives that I call, value creation initiatives, because I think they're going to, help us create more value and manage risk. But at the same time, they're needing to be all in together because all the divisions roll up to them separately. So what I am architecting here is a lot more of a team approach and trying to empower and lock, 4 individuals in terms of their strengths and their ability to lead projects, but then also work together to create even more value, including myself. And I think this is the right approach for us, but I think your question underlines that perspective.
But at some point, you need to arbitrate if in fact there isn't. I mean, maybe you haven't been in this structure long enough, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would say that throughout my career, even the 7 years, I work with very opinionated, very strong investment professionals, and they do differ in terms of their, those opinions. They strongly differ. But there are definitely certain things that help us. And at the end of the day, what you're looking to me to be is responsible for everything. Right? And so if there's going to be a debate, eventually I'll settle it.
Right.
But I prefer to work through a team approach where, first of all, we start large, right? In many things where we don't need to act like tomorrow, you'd rather have a diverse set of ideas, and hopefully you find the best ideas winning, right, within a team structure. So that's what I'm aiming for. But we also have to have a strong direction, and that also occurs when needed.
So there's just no formal process for making a final determination. You hope that through the gestalt of team discussions, you'll come up with the right answer.
Well, we do have formal committees. For example, the liquidity committee, the pacing committee, the RAC committee. So we have a formal governance process. But I thought you were talking about when a couple individuals disagree,
Yeah,
and I
that pretty
can't
much
get them to
was.
agree, then I'm going to need to make the call,
Yeah.
even though, I'm trying to develop a team approach.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rufino.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And since the recruitment was mentioned, I like to ask, as TFM, right? TFMD? All right. As you continue active recruitment and build capacity, what new skill sets or expertise have been prioritized to better manage not only future risks, but seize opportunities as well?
Yeah, maybe I'll start there. And actually, where I would start is actually related to, in some ways, maybe to the question that Mr. Juarez asked previously, which is the first place we really start actually is people who can add to the culture that we have here. And I think that's kind of the first, that's always been the first priority. And that's and if you think of that as a skill set, I do. I think it's a critical one. We start there. And then it really depends on the vertical that they're in. If they're in risk, asset allocation, or balance sheet management, I think it's safe to say that there's, at the different levels, particularly at the investment officer levels, there's maybe more of an emphasis on technical skill and knowledge that they can bring, and particularly an ability to learn. When you get into the more senior levels, it's a combination of experience and judgment and trying to suss that out, and preferably across a variety of domains. But I think it's a growing challenge too. I don't know if you want to add any.
Yeah, I would say with the new vertical balance sheet for liquidity and leverage management, depending on the seniority of the level we'll be recruiting for, we will be looking for specific experience in professionals who've had more experience around either managing the securities, the trading aspect, or working at a fund that had a built more robust program. So depending on the seniority, we'll be looking for something specific around the experience there.
Great. Can I do a quick follow-up regarding long-term resiliency? Are there asset classes or geographic markets the staff sees as underrepresented today, but strategically important in the next decade?
It's a good question. I think it's one we'll explore probably in a bit more depth in the closed session. We have some comments and things we want to talk about in that specifically.
Excellent. Got it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rufino. Any other questions, comments? Steve, Alan, anything you want to add in open? You'll be with us in closed as well, right? Okay. Thank you, June. Thank you, Josh. Any members of the public that want to comment on item 5?
There are no members of the public in the queue.
Okay, thanks. Items 6 and 7 are consent items. Anyone want to pull items 6 or 7? Okay, seeing none. I believe those are approved as consent, Lamont, or do we have to take a?
No, that's fine, yeah.
Thank you,
consent
sir.
items. You may want to check to see if there's any public comment.
Yeah, thanks. Any public comments on?
We do have
6 or
public
7?
comment for item 7.
Great. Thank
If we
you.
could have a 3-minute timer, please.
Thank you.
Our first commenter is Ruth, who will be followed by Mary Jo.
Good afternoon. I am Ruth Rudetsky, retired teacher from San Francisco, here once again to ask you to sell Tesla. Some of us met with some of the CalSTRS investment staff in August. They told us that CalSTRS public equity holdings follow an index. The CalSTRS policies allow no room for discretion with respect to individual stocks, that it would be far too expensive to do individual analyses of the risks of particular holdings, even for only the top, say, 20 holdings. I find it hard to believe that in this entire enormous building, we can't find staff to research 20 holdings twice a year when the alternative is ignoring billion-dollar risks. But following the index is the safest way to get good returns. Maybe in normal times, though even in normal times, I would argue that you should keep an eye on billion-dollar holdings. and no one can argue that these are normal times. In his August 28 column, Nobel laureate economist Paul Krugman said, "The market is a conventional wisdom processor. That is, it reflects views that seem safe to hold because many other people hold them, and the crowd only abandons those views when they become blatantly unsustainable." So if the conventional wisdom is that economic markets will remain more or less normal despite highly abnormal policy, markets will remain calm until the illusion of a normality becomes sustainable. At that point, market prices may change violently. Krugman goes on to say, the current technical term for this phenomenon is a Wile E. Coyote moment. The moment when the cartoon character, having run several steps off the edge of a cliff, looks down and realizes that there's nothing supporting him. Following an index, following conventional wisdom is safe until it's not. Or, as I said before you in July, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean it's a good idea. Please add to this delegation policy of item 7, in keeping with your fiduciary duty to me and my colleagues, a directive to staff to perform company-specific risk assessments of the 20 largest public equity holdings twice a year. If the staff were to perform such assessments, I'm confident that you would conclude that we should sell Tesla now before Tesla's Wile E. Coyote moment. Please sell Tesla soon. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Mary Jo. If Mary Jo is not in the room, that is the conclusion of public comment for item 7.
Item 8 is the approval of the minutes from May of 2025.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Ken, seconded by Karen. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Lamont?
I think we're perhaps going to do a roll call vote. This
Sure, let's do it.
With the teleconference.
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
thank you.
Ms. Peralt? Aye. Mr. Oppenheim?
Aye.
Chairperson Keeley?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Aye.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
Mr. Ruffino?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
Aye.
Mr. Horace?
Aye.
Thank you. Any public comments on item number 8?
There are no public comment for item 8.
Thanks, Samantha. Item 9 is information requests. Were there any information requests from the committee that we captured today? Not right. Okay, thank you. Item 10 is the draft agenda for the next meeting. One of the items that I'll highlight is that we'll get the annual cost report. Also spoke with Scott briefly. We're probably going to add the semi-annual closed session, private equity and real estate items. They seemed a little rushed, so we may be adding those into closed session for November, so we have some additional time. But Scott and I will discuss that between meetings if possible. Anything else, Scott, that you want to highlight?
Yeah, the only other item would be a continuation of the shared vision. This is a big item because we're going to be bringing forward all the insights we gleaned from all the interviews from you, from staff, from our consultants, stakeholders, and even some of our peers like the panel we had today. So we'll give you some of those trends and insights and a little bit around the direction. Mosaic, Geraldine, and I will likely present that.
Great, thank you. Any public comments on item 10?
There's no public comment for item 10.
Okay. I think that brings us to the end of open session. So we will thank Lamont for helping me get through all these minor edits and making sure that we had public comments where we needed them. And just, he told me during the break, or told me before, he ran like a 124-mile race recently. I mean, Lamont, that's amazing, man. guy ran 124 miles. I want him on my side. Okay, so with that, we'll adjourn from open session, take a 5-minute break, and be back in closed session. Thank you.